Hello and welcome to Prairie Pulse. Joining me today is the Director of Tourism for the state of North Dakota, Sarah Oddie Coleman. Sarah, thanks so much for joining us today.
You bet. Love to be here.
As we get started, tell the folks out there a little bit about yourself and your background.
Well, I've been a lover of the state for over 50 years. Grew up here in North Dakota, and I started promoting at the state level a little over 13 years ago. So I've been directing the state effort since then. Prior to that, for 15 years, I was in destination marketing for the Bismarck-Mandan CVB. So I've been marketing the state for a long time, and I've spent my whole career in marketing. So it's been a fun evolution to watch things change, methods change, channels change, but more importantly, to get the word out about North Dakota.
Well, so how did you get involved in the tourism business?
You know, that's an interesting question. I started in sales when I got out of college. It was kind of the 80s and there wasn't a lot out there. So I started in sales and happened to make a sales call on the Bismarck-Mandan Convention and Visitors Bureau. And that piqued my interest a little bit. I always had a big interest in traveling and learned that job, the particular job that they had open there was going out and attracting meetings and conventions to the Bismarck-Mandan area. Got the bug, it never got boring, and I've just been with it ever since.
Well, let's start with talking about your new ads. And
yeah.
Got a recognizable figure on the cover of some of your things. Tell us about that.
We do. We extended our partnership with Josh Duhamel as kind of the spokesperson and the key visual in all of our television and print advertising, as well as digital and some out-of-home advertising. So we started with him a couple years ago. He was the voice of the campaign, and it was just a natural progression as his popularity and his love of the state continued. We asked him if he would be willing to partner in a bigger way, and he was.
Well, I assume you're pleased with the ads the way you're talking. Yeah.
We are. You know, the ads have actually just started to hit, but we did the launch in New York City, and we're live on the Today Show. That month, we had over 1 billion impressions. So those are numbers that we just couldn't purchase on our own with our limited dollars. So the fact that he's such a natural spokesperson, he loves the state, it was an easy fit. He enjoyed every minute of the shoot, and it just shows in the fun ads. And the fact that we were able to gain some national attention with the launch is just a win-win.
Yeah, and with obviously the relationship, I mean, are you expanding the state? I mean, where are these airing, the ads?
The ads will run in our pretty much our traditional target markets, which is Minneapolis, well, pretty much all of Minnesota, as well as Wisconsin. We're getting into Chicago and Illinois a little bit. They have probably the strongest growth potential for us, but it's an expensive media market to buy. We also go into Canada, so Manitoba and Saskatchewan, and then some of our publications and some of the digital have a little broader footprint, go out a little bit further into some of those Midwest markets as well.
Well, I thought maybe you'd take advantage with Josh and the relationship being so recognizable, especially nowadays. But he's a big promoter of the state, and can you talk about that a little bit more? I mean, he comes to the state a lot.
He does. You know, this is home to him. He brings his son and his wife Fergie back on a regular basis, and it really was. We noticed him talking about the state, and that's how the ask initially came about. We were seeing him on television when he's in the Ellen Show or a Today Show segment, and he was always talking about the state. In his movies, he'd wear a UND hat or he'd put that product placement. He wears his Minot State T-shirts, and so he was such a proud ambassador for the state anyway that we just thought it was a natural ask. I had an opportunity to meet him up in Minot and just asked if he'd ever be interested in working with us, and he was, and it just kind of grew from there.
Yeah, so actually then you did approach him with the ask, and did he say yes immediately? Or?
Well, he said yes immediately, but you got to talk to my people because obviously they have a system that you have to go through in working with a number of his agents and folks. So once we got through the legal stuff, we just worked from there, and he was really great to work with. I mean, we definitely got a lot of value out of the relationship.
Sure.
And continue to expect that to grow.
Well, and we hope so. That's great for North Dakota. Can you talk about the numbers for last year and how they turned out?
Yeah, our numbers were good last year. State parks, national park numbers were up pretty consistently. Visitor center numbers were up. Where we did see some declines were in some of the lodging tax, and a few of the taxes were down slightly, mainly due to less activity out west. So it was a little bit mixed. Also, the boarding numbers and the Canadian border crossing numbers were down. We had been up consistently for years, double digits almost every year in boardings. And so it's just kind of one of those natural corrections in that area. And then, of course, we know the Canadian exchange rate does affect the number of folks that are coming down on a regular basis to visit North Dakota. That said, when we look at the averages or we compare the number of border crossings to what, like back in the early 2000s when the exchange rate was similar, we still have significantly more trips than we did at that time. So we know the marketing continues to build that strong base. And then when things dip, they dip, but not as drastically.
Yeah. So what are you hoping for this summer in terms of travel, visitors, and such?
We're really optimistic that it's going to be a good year for North Dakota. The centennial of the national park system is in place, and national parks and Brand USA and a lot of the national entities are really touting that, the Find Your Park messaging. So, of course, being home to Theodore Roosevelt National Park, as well as 2 other national park products, which is Knife River Indian Village National Historic Site in Fort Union, which is a national park property as well. We're positioning those as must-sees. And really, I think those are going to be really attractive because they're, although they're very popular and great attractions, you don't have the bumper-to-bumper traffic that you do in some of the other national parks. So we're hoping that that will really fuel some additional traffic along with the lower gas prices this year.
Well, there you go. You hit on it. You talked about the Canadian dollar, and how much do gas prices affect people traveling, and affect your numbers?
Well, when we target, we really target regionally because that's as far as our budget takes us. So most of those folks that do come on a regular basis do drive. So it's an impact. And where, of course, when the gas prices are up, we try to convince them it's not a deal breaker. We definitely tout the advantage that we have now with lower hotel rooms and lower gas prices this year.
Mm-hmm, sure. What about hotel availability I guess more in the western part of the state? Is that an issue at all?
No, lots of hotels. In fact, you'll find there's over 300 new hotel properties that have been built in the state in the last 8 or 10 years. So you'll find brand new properties in places that you haven't seen hotels in years. So whether you're looking at Williston, Dickinson, Medora, Watford City, all of those areas will have good availability, and it's a great time to get out throughout the state. Additionally, the cities too, Fargo and Bismarck and Minot, Grand Forks, they've all had new hotels. Even though they've really built a lot of new product for visitors to enjoy, the availability should be good this summer.
Well, and you mentioned the oil industry a little bit, and maybe we could talk about that right now, because has the oil industry downturn actually increased hotel availability?
It has, yep. There's no question there are some of those companies that were doing a lot of business travel, and business travel is obviously part of that whole tourism picture. So that has impacted it pretty dramatically, especially when you look at Williston, Minot, and Dickinson. So we've got an opportunity here. We look at it as an opportunity. It's really time for our state or our industry to shine. You look at agriculture and energy, both commodity-based industries are going through some little difficult times for factors out of their control. We have a few factors out of our control, like exchange rates, but we have an opportunity to really kind of pick up our share of the economic puzzle this year.
Okay, well, good. Well, you mentioned Centennial event. Are there any special events going on this summer that might interest people? Or?
There are always a lot of events. In fact, what I always recommend is that people go on to our website at ndtourism.com and click on the events section, because there you can search by region or by specific interest area or by the dates. So if you're coming into the state and you want to look at a certain weekend or a certain time frame, you can do that. But there are a number of special events tying in with the Centennial. The big one is Founders Day. They'll actually be unveiling the Theodore Roosevelt Quarter at that event, and that's in August. So if you want to plan a trip out west, that'd be a good time to do it.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's turn to something else. You do a photo contest. Can you talk about that and maybe even tell us about some of your winners?
Yeah, well, it's a fun event, and the idea is that everybody's a photographer now, right? The technology's improved. I mean, you have more technology on your phone than you used to have in a $1,000 camera a few years ago. So what we really like to do is get people to take pictures and then share those. And And we encourage that on our social channels all the time, especially Instagram and Facebook, a lot of photo and video sharing there. But we also ask them to enter their best pictures into the Governor's Photo Contest. And that we take the photos through the September so that it allows people kind of a full year to take them. Actually, they can be taken before that too, but the deadline is in September, and then we judge in a number of different categories and choose just the photos that showcase the state best. And then we use those photos in our materials online, on our website, and some of them are in our travel guide, and they're also displayed in AAA. They're a partner with us, AAA of North Dakota, and then the First Lady's office and the Governor's office and the Attorney General's office all have some of those prints displayed as well. So if you're at the Capitol, pop in, you can see some of the photos there.
And obviously they get a photo credit, I'm sure.
They do. One of them was a shot of Teddy's cabin in Theodore Roosevelt National Park, and that actually made the cover of a magazine, a group tour magazine. So that's pretty cool for an amateur photographer.
Well, it is. What about the Fargo Marathon? It's gotten bigger and bigger, it seems, and continues that pace. How much of that is a help or a draw for tourism in North Dakota, or at least for the Fargo area?
Huge, absolutely. Those events that draw people from throughout the country are great for just the impact, just the dollars that those visitors spend during that event, but also for awareness and for word of mouth. And people go back and talk about, I had no idea how fun Fargo is. It's this, great eclectic mix of everything, all things cool. And so I think that really helps. Sporting events are a big deal. You look at things like, it's hard to get tickets sometimes for Bison football or for UND hockey, but UND, I believe, has season ticket holders from all 50 states, season ticket holders. So those events are big. People travel for sports, no question.
Well, and sports is a big thing. I guess the Carson Wentz goes on for now, but as we tape this anyway, what impact do hunting and fishing have? Because obviously that is a huge thing in North Dakota.
It is. It's a big impact, and especially for some of those specific rural areas, that's kind of their bread and butter throughout the year. You look at areas like Region and Mott, and they have a number of outfitters and guest places that people stay at, and that's kind of when they really see the traffic. But throughout the state, the numbers have been very good. We have great outdoor resources, and we see the folks that come in for that. Fishing, out-of-state fishing licenses continue to grow every year as well. So those are definitely things that we're known for and things that people repeat. Those are annual trips. Those are traditions. I ran into somebody in the airport last year who was from Atlanta, and every year him and 10 of their buddies come to North Dakota for their hunting trip.
Similar thing. I ran into some guys at a truck stop in Jamestown or somewhere. They're from Kentucky and doing their annual duck and goose hunting trip. Well, let's go to some of the other great destinations that you've already talked about some. But Theodore Roosevelt National Park, what are people going to see? What's going on out there?
Well, the national park is such a treasure. It really involves, wildlife viewing, hiking, the scenic drives. I think what people experience the most or enjoy the most is that it's so wide open and it's not overcrowded. It's a smaller park, so you don't have a ton of concessionaires and all of those things. It's just more of a primitive, natural setting. And people really appreciate that, whether it's the North Unit, up around Watford City, or the South Unit by Medora.
Mm-hmm. And with all that, of course, there's camping, there's things they can do. But if somebody came to visit the national park, how long should they consider staying?
Well, I would recommend a couple days in the South Unit, and then I'd venture up and do at least a day in the North Unit, and then you can combine that with some of the other historic attractions up near Williston. So I would recommend 4 days would be great, and then you could do some good hikes. You could do some good drives and get out and see the scenery, but also enjoy some other activities, events while you're there.
Okay, and let's talk about the Custer House. It seems to be a great attraction as well.
Fort Abraham Lincoln State Park is just a gem. The fact that they've got Custer's Cavalry Square there and all of the buildings and the reenactments that they do, the living history programs that they do every weekend throughout the summer, is really a key attraction to kind of telling the story of the American West. But what's really cool about that whole area is that you also have Annislant Indian Village right there on the same site. You've got the visitor center that interprets that as well. And then you have the infantry post right above there. So there's not very many sites where you can experience that much North Dakota and American West history as you can right there on the banks of the Missouri River. And it's just a few miles, I think 6 miles outside of Mandan.
Yeah, we talk about history, and one of the things that people can see, in addition to what we already talked about, what about the Ronald Reagan missile site?
Great attraction. You know, it's just a step back in time. You feel like you're in a time capsule as you go down and go into that house. It really makes you feel how they must have felt when they were living there. So I think it's, especially now, you know, with the turmoil that we have in the world, it's a great experience to bring kids to and bring the younger folks to try and get them to realize where things were at during that point of history.
Well, you also mentioned Fort Abraham Lincoln, but can you mention some of the other forts and attractions?
Yeah, you know, there's a lot of forts throughout the state with interpretive programs and whatnot. One of them, Fort Mandan, north of Bismarck, near Washburn, where Lewis and Clark, of course, spent the winter, is another great site. The nice thing about that as well is that it's right by the Lewis and Clark Interpretive Center, which is right off of Highway 83. So you can get the museum that kind of interprets the history, but then you can go down into the fort and see how they actually lived there. So that's a great one. Fort Union up by Williston, of course, it really interprets that whole fur trade era and the trading that happened in North Dakota, where we literally were a hub of activity. Fort Abercrombie is the opposite corner, of course, in the southeast corner of the state, and that one as well is just another example of how folks lived and how they developed this part of the country.
Mm-hmm. Are there other good attractions you might talk about? I think of Lewis and Clark and that adventure you can kind of look at.
Yeah, and that's a fun, you know, that's a popular, we promoted it a lot during the bicentennial years, but our research does continue to show that people are very interested in history and the history of North Dakota when they come to travel here, which is why that was one of the locations that we chose to shoot both the television and the print ad campaigns this year, is because people want to experience that history. And so you can really find that, you know, all the way Knife River Indian Village, all the way up the Missouri corridor, you know, into, you know, if you come in through the south, go up through Bismarck, Washburn, and then over following the river. There's really great stops about every 100 miles or so. So that's a great trip if you haven't done that before.
Yeah, you know, you talked about cities, Fargo, the bigger cities with large events. Are they really becoming huge attractions more and more, or they just continue? And of course, I think about Minot with the State Fair and the Hustfest. What about events like that?
Events are big drivers, especially like you mentioned, some of those large events, you know, the State Fair, Red River Valley Fair, you know, those, they draw people for a number of nights in a row with the attractions and the activities that they have. Norris Kustfest is another great example. In Bismarck, you've got the United Tribes International Powwow, which is a huge event as well. So, you know, Fargo Marathon, we talked about that. Events are a big draw, and they attract a different group than you maybe are going to get with your traditional advertising because they're more niche specific, but it allows you to kind of focus in on those folks and market to them specifically. When you look at event centers, like right now, this spring and summer in North Dakota, we have a huge lineup of entertainment, national entertainment. When you start looking at the Fargo Dome and the Alerus Center and the Ralph and the Bismarck Civic Center and the fairgrounds, both in West Fargo and Minot, there's entertainment just about every weekend coming up through the fall. So those attract people.
And all those numbers get counted into your tourism numbers.
Well, tourism is everything, you know. I mean, so many times people think of tourism as just the one leisure trip, but it's business travel, it's all kinds of travel. It's when you're going to your kids' hockey tournaments, it's all of that kind of travel. But yeah, the venues are more and more attracting people both in-state and out-of-state. And the city experience in general, too, we know attracts people specifically from Canada and from our near border communities that are maybe smaller. But it's marketable because of the uniqueness of the offerings in the city. So you do see us marketing those city experiences as well.
Well, so all of this we've talked about a little bit. How are you funded? How do you have money to invest in the marketing and things like that? So where does that money come from?
We are general funded, so we have to go to the legislature every year and ask for dollars to fund the marketing programs. Of course, that may be a little bit more of a challenge this year, which we're obviously concerned about. Marketing is one of those things that we need to convince people it's an investment. We show a really strong return on the investment. The industry brings in more tax dollars than we expend in our marketing efforts. And so we're really hoping that we can continue those efforts in a big way, because it's an impact. It's a huge impact for our state's economy.
I'm sure it can be. Well, can you talk some about the Heritage Center renovation and things that went on there for the last, I guess, 2 or 3 years?
Yeah, that's been a fun project. I'm on the Historical Society board, so we've been working on that for a long time. It's been a lot of fun to see it open, and everyone that you bring in there is really, really impressed with the facility. They did just open this year a new, they call it the Treehouse, so it's kind of a pre-K exhibit area near the old entrance. So that's a fun place to bring younger kids if you haven't been there before. Real hands-on, active play space where they're going to learn to trick them into learning a little bit.
Well, just let them have fun and learn as they go along.
Absolutely.
Is the renovation complete now? You say you're on the board, so you know, or is there anything left to do?
It is. Nope, it's complete now. That was kind of the last piece. You know, there may be some additional outside work, and there's an amphitheater out there that maybe will be expanded or attract more events. And then there's also the Governor's Gallery, which revolves. So that's the fun part about it, is you won't see first of all, you can't see everything. You have to go back about 10 times to see everything. But that will be changing exhibits and traveling exhibits. So those will continue to be evolving.
Mm-hmm. You've mentioned a lot of sites and a lot of things, and you mentioned a few of these, but can you talk more about sort of the good camping and trails to go on maybe in the state?
Yeah, you know, hiking is such a popular activity, and most people can do it. You know, mountain biking and horseback riding and some of those things are a little bit more adventurous, but hiking is something that just about everybody can do, and we've got great hiking trails statewide, whether you want the rugged west, you know, with the Mattahey Trail and some of the national park hikes, or if you want to do the North Country Trail, which winds kind of through eastern North Dakota and all the way up to Lake Sakakawea. There's some good hiking trails right around Lake Sakakawea. Fort Ransom has expanded. There's some good hiking there, but they've expanded some of their camping and have yurts down there. And then the other one that comes to mind is the Pembina Gorge area. They have a great recreational trail that they just finished this year, so it's now a complete loop, a 4-mile loop in that state recreational area, and people are just surprised. You know, you're kind of in the valley, and then boom, you hit the gorge, and it's so different, so beautiful, really wooded and great vistas, and so that's one I would recommend for a good hike as well. But there's camping, you know, camping statewide. The state parks offer great camping facilities. They continue to expand, like I had mentioned, the yurts and the cabins and some of those experiences if you don't own your own camper that you bring with, or of course there's always primitive camping at a number of locations statewide.
Yeah, so really you would encourage families, if they're thinking about where do I go, maybe look just across the state.
Absolutely. Depending on what you're looking for, especially the state parks, they all have a little different interest area. You know, some of them are right on historic sites like Fort Lincoln, and we had mentioned, or Fort Stevenson. Other are more water recreation based. Still others interpret different kinds of history and culture throughout the state. So you can camp and do other things too.
Yeah. Well, when you travel to your colleagues across the nation for tourism conferences, I assume you have those, what's sort of the reaction to North Dakota?
Well, I think people are they've been the last few years, they've been real envious because we didn't have the recession and we were seeing strong numbers. We were leading the nation in growth for tourism. Well, what comes up must come down. So we're kind of going to see that correction a little bit. But the benefit of that is that now they're way more aware of the state. So that caught their interest. They're aware of it. They're interested in what we're doing. I think our campaign is going to make them a little jealous this year. Not just because of the celebrity and using Josh Duhamel's celebrity status, but the fact that we used humor. And while tourism marketing is inspirational, it's really going to, I think, help motivate just because it's fun and interesting and engaging.
Well, with all that said, what's the best part of your job?
best part of my job? I think it's just getting the opportunity to talk about the state and to educate people. And sometimes I catch myself being defensive, as you run into people and they know absolutely nothing. But for every person that you talk to that you can tell them a little something about the state, it just opens their eyes a little bit more. And I think the other fun part is just to see how everything has grown and all the offerings have broadened. We have dozens of wineries now. We have all sorts of trails. We have just a growing list of experiences that we can offer.
Yeah. Well, if people want more information or would like to get a travel brochure, where can they go? Who can they contact?
They should go online at ndtourism.com, or they can always call 1-800-HELLO-ND.
Hello, ND. Well, Sarah, thanks so much for joining us. You've got a lot in North Dakota.
You bet. We'll see you out on the trail this summer.
All right. Thanks for joining us. Well, that's all we have on Prairie Post for this week. And as always, thanks for watching.
This program is funded by the members of Prairie Public.